There we go. Great. Well, welcome to this Network-Centric Resources online discussion. This is a series that aims to capture hard-earned knowledge and lessons learned. I'm your host, I'm Dirk Slater. I am the Fab Writer in Fab Writers. We build capacity to use tech and data to strengthen advocacy and humanitarian efforts. This Network-Centric Resources project aims to learn from those that are developing people-powered and participatory resources through sharing ownership, enabling contribution, and supporting collaboration. What we are discussing today is perhaps the core of sharing ownership. It is incorporating user feedback, and through this we demonstrate the importance of contribution. The follow-through of incorporation of user feedback is a key way that we become accountable to our stakeholders. So the way today's discussion will work, we'll take a moment to do some roll call, hear from you, and then we'll form small breakout groups to give you an opportunity to share your challenges and successes in managing user feedback. After about 20 minutes or so of that, we'll come back to the large group and share our main takeaways and compile a best practice list that I will eventually share on the Fab blog, of course, crediting all you fine contributors, of course. I will also stick around in the Zoom room afterwards if anybody has any challenges or issues in your Network-Centric Resource project that you would like to discuss. And note, as I mentioned, the conversation is being recorded. It will be made available on YouTube later today on the Fab Writers channel. I'll also be posting the notes in the Fab blog in the next few days. So I'd actually just love to hear from a few people that have filled in on the roll call about what you're doing and what you're working on to start us off. So maybe I could get Ashley. Do you mind coming off of mute and sharing what you're doing at Usable?
Of course. Thank you, Dirk. Really excited to be a part of the conversation. So my name is Ashley Fowler, and I use she, her pronouns. And I am the lead here at Internews on our Usable project, which is really centered around this idea of creating sustainable feedback loops between digital security trainers who are working with at-risk communities specifically, open source privacy and security tool developers or tool teams, as well as designers and UX experts. And we're actually in the process now of creating a resource that captures some of the different ways and methods that we've used with trainers to capture this feedback, as well as effective ways to communicate that feedback to developers. And so I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Cool. Also just want to get a few of the new faces here. Madeline Maxwell, would you mind coming off mute and telling us who you are and what you're working on?
Hi, I'm Madeline. I work at the engine room as a research manager. So does everyone know the engine room? Thumbs up.
Say more.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work that we do involves creating resources for various communities. Might be guides or sharing our research reports. It might be creating a community, a digital community. And we always want to involve the people we're creating these resources for in that process, get as much feedback as we can. So that's a focus of a couple of projects I'm working on at the moment. One challenge that we've come up against is that the only people who are available to give us feedback and participate in those processes are people who are in full-time employment. So if you're a freelancer, you're working independently, who's paying for that time? And we don't have, our budgets don't account for that. So I'd just love to hear a bit about some of you guys' processes and how you account for that, how you get user feedback without it feeling extractive.
Cool. Thank you for that, Madeline. Greg Bloom, can I ask you to come off mute and tell us a little bit about what you're up to and what you're doing?
Hi there. I'm on my phone because my computer was malfunctioning. So I lead the Open Referral Initiative. We're developing standards and interoperable tools for health, human, and social service referral providers. And it's an open network. and we're trying to develop protocols for a field without becoming a formal standards body. And it's going okay, but a lot of that really rests on my, good faith ability to benevolently not dictate to people, but like transcribe from others and sort of make sure that the right information goes into the right places, and it's somewhat ad hoc. And so as I'm thinking about scaling up our processes, I'm trying to figure out how to balance like some more formal structure without losing the ability for people who maybe aren't going to submit GitHub issues to be heard, right, in that process. So I'm thinking about that. And also just this morning, I was dealing with a bad process in a project that I am a partner on, and thinking about how to rally user feedback in order to intervene on that poorly managed process from above.
Very cool. And actually, I would love to be getting a case study on that, because I think there will be a lot of learning in that. Great. That was good flavor, a little bit of who is here. You are all going to get to know each other a little bit better. One thing I want to do before we move on, though, is introduce the people here who have graciously volunteered to be anchors for today's call. So you are going to get to know more about them and their work, but just want to introduce them and get them to say hello. So Heather Leeson from the International Federation of the Red Cross, you mind saying hello?
There. Nice to see some familiar faces and meet some new folks. I'm also with the OpenStreetMap community, so I can talk about both. What do you do in large global communities, and how much fun is that? Thanks.
Great. Kristin Anton from Hiradox. Can you say hello and tell us how you're doing today?
Hello, greetings from DC. I'll be talking about our user feedback process for WASI.
Very good. Soraya Okuda from EFF, you mind coming off mute and telling us how you're doing today?
Hi, everyone. Really good to see familiar faces doing well this morning. Espresso finally kicked in, and I'll be chatting about the Security Education Companion and our user feedback loops for a number of our projects.
Cool. Megan Doherty, do you mind coming off mute and telling us how you're doing?
Hey, everyone. I don't think I've seen some of the familiar faces ever in the same chat room before, so this is pretty cool. Hello from DC. I'm coming from the kind of consulting end, so happy to talk about kind of the fast user research that I do on multiple concurrent projects. And Mozilla Open Leaders. Hey, Chad.
Very good. Very good. Hi, Chad. And finally, Kim Graham from Shared Assets. You want to come off mute and tell us how you're doing?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim from Shared Assets in the UK, and this is my first one of these sort of discussions, so really excited to see how it works and get all of your input. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. So as I have now introduced all the small group anchors, I have some slight bad news in that what we are about to do, you are going to have no control over which small group breakouts you're going to actually get into, and so you're just going to have to trust me that I am going to put you in somewhere that you are going to find interesting, and we're going to go from there. So just apologies for that, but and before we start this off, again, just to say thank you to the anchors. Just so you know, when I started thinking about this discussion, it came from a conversation with Soraya Okuda about her struggles with managing user feedback. When I put the call out on the Network-Centric resources list, these anchors are the people that came back and said, I want to have this conversation, so can I please have an anchor? And I'm so grateful that you did that. We're about to start this mad experiment and see how it goes. So bear with me. Let me just give you a little foresight in terms of the tech on what's about to happen. So I am going to hit breakout rooms. I'm going to take a few seconds to put you all in different breakout rooms. Then you will see a prompt, and you will need to hit that prompt in order to join the breakout rooms. Once you are there, your anchor is going to ask somebody to take notes. For whoever's taking notes, you'll notice in the Google Doc, that we have, I've got sections for each one of our anchors. So if you can fill in notes there. I'm going to let you guys talk for about 20 minutes. The anchor will tell you a little bit about their experience in using feedback, and then you guys will brainstorm both in terms of what worked about it and also how they might improve it. And then we're going to come back and talk about what we've gotten out of these discussions, and then we will be ending by the top of the hour. So with that, bear with me while I hit the do my little breakout room magic and throw you into groups. So hold on. So I would love to, what I'd love to get from each group is the main takeaways, like what are maybe 2 or 3 main points, things that really surprised you during your conversation. You guys have done a great job of documenting stuff, so I'm also going to pull on that for this magical blog post that I'm going to be putting together. So let me start at the top of the list. Who did I have at the top of the list? Kristin. Anyone from Kristin's group want to share a couple of main takeaways from your conversation?
Who wants to speak?
Yeah, I'll go. One of the things that jumped out at me is I'm a very locally focused person, and on the call we had people that were very globally focused, and then the way that they collect feedback and the options that are available to them are so much different from what we're able to do just by having a place in the same community as somebody else that we're working with.
So you get more face-to-face, Bob, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, yeah. So more opportunities to do that. And so we don't have to think about digital feedback nearly to the extent that most of the other folks did on the call.
Interesting, cool. Anything else from Kristin's group?
Yeah, just the number of different stakeholders you've got in terms of providing you feedback and how they don't want the same view. They want some kind of, like, some want more technical views, some want more high-level views and strategic views, and some want to know that their ticket they submitted last week is now in the product, and all these kinds of things, which just takes forever to sort out.
That is very good. There is not a one-size-fits-all in the joy of user feedback because of all of the different users. One other thing from Kristin's group at all.
Well, Maddie and Matt were both talking about getting feedback on like actual documents as opposed to like about resources that they've developed as opposed to tools, like technology tools. And the challenges that they were talking about was like the same thing as we have for our like UASI or whatever technology tool that we're building. And they were talking a lot about like how do you incentivize people to give you feedback. And yeah, it was really, and then also like if you do get feedback from somebody who's really loud, how do you confirm that that's valuable to other users? You know, how do you know what's real? Yeah, so it was a really good conversation.
So, and just note that the Network-Centric Resources project is Network-Centric Resources because sometimes it is materials, sometimes it is software, but a lot of these rules do apply across the board. So thanks for pointing that out. Let me get to Meg's group. Meg and anyone in that group want to share 2 or 3 things that were ahas for you guys?
I mean, as the note taker, what popped out for me was the synthesis of multiple methods, just the approach of which is resource intensive, obviously, but trying to get feedback in multiple different ways from multiple different perspectives and then synthesizing that. We also had the challenge, not necessarily of, we didn't talk specifically about the challenge of like a particularly loud feedback contributor, but one that like might be contributing something that's an outlier or something that even potentially conflicts with like the values of the project and the goals of the project. And the challenge of figuring out how do we receive this? Is it like actually an important signal, or did we just need to rephrase the question? and or should we be dismissing feedback that somehow like seriously doesn't jibe with where you're trying to go collectively, or is there a way to sort of like aggregate it as part of the long tail of running issues that you might not ever try to draw people's attention to into the future, even though it still technically exists in your knowledge base?
Great, cool. Anything else from Meg's group? Meg?
No, that was great. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for.
I will actually roll through because I do want to make sure we get to everybody and we finish on time. So thank you for that. Kim and Kim's group, any key takeaways to share from your discussion?
Well, yeah, my group are very generous with their knowledge. I think that the main things that came out for me were we kind of had a discussion about what participation means and how it's very good to establish at the start of any kind of bit of research with your network what participation means to the people who are involved, so that if you get that understood collectively at the start, then at the end or going through the process, people will have the same expectations and you'll be able to build the project in such a way that people actually do feel like they're meaningfully participating, and it's not performative. So yeah, that was like a major kind of takeaway from me. I could say other things, but I'll maybe just see if anyone else wants to contribute.
Anyone else from Kim's group?
I think the other thing we were talking about is impact. So like understanding ways of measuring impact, which is why I dropped those links in the chat if folks want. It's from a report that we did interviewing grantees at Luminate over the last year. One of the things that we were talking about is there's a tendency and especially using technology to think about ways that the technology can facilitate lots and lots of data collection and metrics. And actually it's better to think about what your mission is and how your mission is achieved and like ways to tell that story, not necessarily, don't just default to counting because we can, because the technology enables it, like thinking about impact and ways to like measure impact that aren't just about numbers and counting, because in some contexts it wouldn't be safe to count or to create a database of people or things like that.
Great. Thank you for that. Anything else from Kim's group before we move on?
We all already know this, but I think inspired by what Greg just said, I realized, and this did not come up in the small group, but just maybe as a flag for Kim, how not to underestimate the amount of time, the time it takes to come up with some really powerful and useful questions. So I just wanted to underline how important that is and how sometimes that just gets forgotten somehow.
Yeah, it sure does. Thank you, Neil. Appreciate that. Let's move on to Heather's group. So Heather, do you want to share key takeaways, or anyone in your group?
I'm hoping for one of the group members to potentially speak up, give them like a 10, 9, 8, because I know we have like short time. Takers. Always trying to step back. All right, I'll do it. So we have some headlines. One is really be transparent in the process. And I feel like Ashley and I both kind of really focused on that with both of our examples about like, how do you involve people in the process to give them at least what the process is and morph that and be able to work with them on it. We want to invest, you have to invest time to build collaborative spaces and to onboard people, even if in an inclusive way. Sometimes that could be a science project. Really had some great examples around finding the common ground for terminology, because you might not necessarily have that common language yet, and so without terminology you can't get to common language, which means you can't communicate. Therefore you might end up negotiating changes with communities. There's some work around standards and documentation to find the common ground, and then just thinking through the different methodologies. We dumped some resources in there. Chris gave us something about consequence planning, so you can go listen to a digital impact podcast, and there's some stuff here about nonviolent communication that we did in humanitarian OpenStreetMap to try and negotiate change in complex different things. Headlines. What did I miss? Because I know we're short on time. Thanks. Anybody from the team? What did I miss? Any other kind of aha moments? I tried to take notes. They're not the perfect ones, but they're notes as they are.
And so appreciate that, Heather. Thank you so much. And that was excellent report back. So last but not least, the inspiration for the call, Soraya, any main takeaways from your discussion, or anyone in your group want to share?
Might give it a moment to see if anybody from the group. Go ahead.
I could share because I was taking notes.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so I think some of the key points that we came up with was take a human-centered approach. So find out what people actually want and need before and during your process. Don't just make materials that fit what you think they need. So that's ahead of time as well as during. Soraya pointed out the importance of project management. Otherwise, you're managing a lot of different kinds of work, and we often don't have dedicated project management in nonprofits, but it's really important. We talked about planning and managing your flow of user feedback and systematizing where that feedback goes. And also about integrating feedback and comms functions in your org, because a lot of the feedback actually is going to come from comms, and then your responses to the feedback will be communications as well. So feedback and comms are really closely linked. If anybody else would like to add anything.
That was excellent, by the way. So thank you, Molly. And also, I do want to say, I really appreciate everyone's excellent notes that were taken during this. So, and I will be using them for the blog post, and we'll also be using, I'll send something around and make sure that your names do want to be shared on the blog post and all that. Don't worry, I'm not just going to hit publish and expose you all. One thing to note in terms of managing user feedback, one thing I will be doing after this call is I will be sending you a form that's to elicit some feedback about these online discussions, because every time I do them, I learn a lot, and they get slowly improved over time. Believe it or not, folks, they have gotten better. A couple of things I wanted to mention that I have learned during this call in terms of some user feedback that was given to me. One is perhaps, and Greg, thanks for this, perhaps UTC confuses people in terms of the time zone and might not be so helpful to share. And I am thinking, because I had just started going crazy with the UTC and thinking that maybe that was not such a great idea. Morgan, thank you, Morgan. Morgan helped me figure out that in order to use the breakout rooms, you have to have the Zoom client running. You can't just come in from the web thing. So take a note of that. And the other thing that I just made a note of to myself is that I can actually do the organizing of the rooms when I get the anchors to introduce themselves, so that you are all hanging the way you were, though that was quite fun. And I appreciated the banter that started to happen, because it does show me that these are forming a bit of culture, and I want to thank you all for that. So first of all, before I let you go, gotta do thank you, Heather, Kristin, Meg, Kim, and Soraya. I am grateful that you guys agreed to do this, and just thank you so much. All of you that took notes, thank you for doing that. Also, for those of you, everyone for participating, I am just grateful that you came today and have contributed the way you have. I just want to say the online discussion will be made available on YouTube. I'll be posting notes from the discussion along with the recording soon on the Fab blog. You can also use the Network-Centric, please do this, use the Network-Centric resources email list, discuss@fabwriters.net, to provide updates on your projects. Anytime you have a challenge, please feel free to post, and hopefully they will get addressed. And also ask questions that will hopefully get answered by your peers. And just to say, that will conclude top of the hour of our online discussion. I will stick around for a few minutes just in case anybody has something further that they want to share, but I am about to hit end on the record, and just to say thank you so much. Totally appreciated this, guys. Hope you all have lovely days.
Nice to meet all of you.